Hi, my name's Pat Foltz, and I am the first year experience coordinator for the College of Creative Arts and Communication. I'm here today speaking to the president of Youngstown State University, President Jim Tressel.
Good to be
Glad
here
to
with
have
you.
you. Glad to have
What a
you.
neat topic.
It
First
is.
year experience.
I'm
Plato
excited.
said the beginning is the key to any journey.
And it is. I'm so glad that it is now a requirement.
Yeah.
Your almost entire adult career has been in higher education somewhere.
It has.
And at, I think, the last university you were at, you were in charge of college success.
Right.
What do you think are the most important things an entering freshman ought to know to get started on the right foot to be successful?
Yeah, I think there are dozens of things, but let me pick two. I think the first thing it's important that a student knows is that there are so many of us here to provide the resources and whatever it is they need to go to be successful. And you can't be afraid to use those resources. And those that get involved with their faculty member in the class or their tutor or their peer mentor or their study group or the extra study session or whatever's there, the people that get involved and get engaged in that have success. And get engaged outside of the classroom because it just wraps the whole experience together. So I think first and foremost, knowing that they're not here alone.
Yes.
And that there is so much help and support. Now, second thing I think I would say is that I've always felt from a leadership standpoint, you're the first year experience leader, Dean Paul's the college leader, the faculty member is the course content leader, is that our task is to make sure that the student understands the difficulty of the challenge and what one needs to do to successfully handle the challenge and get to the finish line, mission accomplished,
Right.
And that it's not easy. They've taken the next step. They've taken the step into higher education. That's why it's called higher education. Not everyone gets to do that.
Right.
Not everyone can successfully do it, in part because sometimes they haven't really sat down and thought about the difficulty of the challenge, and I'm going to have to raise my game. And I think if you come in knowing that the challenge is difficult and that you've got everything you need at hand to be successful, if those two things are in place, obviously you have to get to class. You can't be a person that thinks, well, I'll look at my friend's notes. You have to study the chapter more than once. You have to reread your notes. You have to prepare for the exams. You have to begin your projects early and not late. I mean, there's a million things you and I can talk to them about,
Right.
but I think the two biggest ones are we've got plenty here to help you if you'll use it, and please understand this is a great challenge that we're beginning together, but we can do it.
Absolutely. In our chairs, we've been discussing with the chairs of each of the different departments within the college, and Dean Paul, Dean Mooring, the terms advocacy and advocate keep coming up by them. I see you as sort of being the most important advocate for the YSU community with the public. How do you see your advocacy as?
I think that the college president has a unique opportunity to be an advocate for education as a whole. Sometimes I don't think we have the conversation going where it should go as to the impact higher education can have. Obviously, the impact of education as a whole, our world happens to be higher education, and I think the conversation needs to revolve more around what impact higher ed has on lifetime earning, lifetime health, lifetime opportunity, research and innovation, home ownership. You name anything you can think of and look at the data, and it will tell you that the person who has gone through the rigors, who has accepted the challenge of higher education and successfully completed it, their scores on any metrics are higher. And sometimes I'm not sure that we have that conversation as broad and wide and constant as we could. It seemed like in this past year or two, in the midst of the whole national election and everything, the discussion seemed to revolve around free college. Should we be going to college? Oh, is there too much student debt? Should we really be going on to that? Well, to me, all the data shows you that A, it's not free if you want to be good, and B, it absolutely pays dividends, and I guess C, in this day and age, this is a global world we live in. It's a global competition. If you're not educated, if you're not able to compete, life will be a little bit more difficult. And so to advocate for the importance of education, I think, is a responsibility. To advocate for Youngstown State University, obviously, is maybe a selfish one, but it's a responsibility because of all the great things that we're doing. To advocate for our faculty, for our staff, for our students, all the while knowing that while we advocate for one another, just like you'll advocate for the students have to do their part. So we as higher education need to constantly get better. We have to do the best we can from an affordability standpoint, from a financial awareness standpoint. We have to talk about all those things, but clearly I have no problem saying it's a great idea to get a higher education.
Pretty good investment.
Pretty good investment. You know, it's funny, people talk about the national average for student debt and so forth, and it's like $26,000.
Yes.
And $26,000 is a lot of money.
It is.
But in the big picture of things, that's a car.
Absolutely.
So now which one will take you further, that car or that education?
Absolutely.
And I don't know if we have that public conversation like we should, and that's our responsibility.
Absolutely. As I've talked to a lot of administration, the dean's office, the provost, a lot of them come from teaching backgrounds. You don't get a chance to teach as much anymore. Do you ever get an opportunity to come into the classrooms around school and see what's happening? Do you get a chance to get back in touch? I think your degrees are in education, so do you get a chance?
Well, fortunately, for 15 years when I was the head coach here in football and the athletic director, I still taught a class. And the same thing when I was at Ohio State, I still taught a class. For whatever reason, when I came to YSU, and when I was at Akron as a vice president, I taught a class. When I came here, for some reason, the Board of Trustees thought I was going to have my hands full, and they put it in my contract that in the first year I couldn't teach a class, which was fine. I was probably pretty busy. But this past year, I began teaching again. And I tell people all the time, that's why I got into education, was because I appreciated so much what I had gained, not just in knowledge and content, but just in the experience of being led by the faculty, being inspired by the faculty.
Sure.
So I've always wanted to be able to be a part of that giving back or paying forward or however you put it. So it's probably more fun than anything I do. But you know, that's the way most administrative detail is that it's important. We have to do it well. But really our core mission is our interaction with our students.
Sure.
And so there'll be a day that, you know, I've always said that's what I want to end my career doing solely, is teaching. But in the meantime, we've got a lot of other work to do, and I'll just get to teach a little bit.
Absolutely. We see you around campus all the time. Some of the current research on success and what makes people successful tells us that it's not as much IQ, not even as much emotional intelligence, that a lot of what makes some people successful that we couldn't measure for a while is this old-fashioned concept of grit. This whole idea of, do we have the stick-to-itiveness to do what needs to be done to accomplish a goal? Do you agree with that? And do you think students should learn grit?
My experience has been those that have really reached their potential, whether they be an individual or a collective group, have only been the ones who have had that ability to handle adversity, to have that stick-to-itiveness, as you've talked about, because it is a competitive world we live in. Yes, K through 3 is new for the person, and fifth grade gets harder, and high school gets harder. But undergraduate school, and then going on and competing in whatever arena you're going to compete in, is extremely competitive. You're not going to have everything go your way. We always talk about the law of progression. The law of progression is not linear.
Yes.
The law of progression may begin linear, but then there's bumps in roads.
Sure.
And how you handle those, in my experience, I've always talked about there are certain non-negotiables for success. Work ethic, certainly. Talent. You need to have some cognitive ability that you've developed and competencies that you've developed as you move up the ladder. I've always believed that curiosity is really critical in having a chance to be successful. You can't feel like you know it all and you've stopped learning. You have to remain curious. But really more important than those, I've always placed grit as being, regardless of how hard I worked and how talented I've been and how curious I've been to get better, if I can't handle the tough times, if I can't handle the moments where it didn't go the way I planned, I'm probably not going to make it. The only trait I have found and grown to believe that's more important than grit, if we're going to be successful as an individual to impact the good of the whole, or successful as a group to impact the good of the whole, the only trait I've found to be more important is selflessness.
Oh.
Because sometimes we work so hard on what we want and don't really stop to consider, is that the best thing for the good of the whole? We get passionate about, and we get curious as to how to get better, and we'll fight through anything we have to because we love what we're doing. But we've got to make sure that it's not just about me, it's about us. And my experience has shown me that the most impactful individuals, the most successful groups, have been the ones who, and it's not easy. Human nature is not a selfless nature.
Exactly.
The ones that have intentionally worked to become selfless have been the ones, in my mind, that have ultimately reached their potential.
Excellent advice. My last question for you is that, well, it's really letting you open up. Those who don't really know you, have just read your resume, have seen what you've done, might not know that you are a huge fan of the arts. Where did that develop, and how do you see a college of creative arts and communication within the larger university?
Well, like most of us, it usually begins with our blessings and our opportunities. And sometimes if no one sat down and taught you to read, you might not read that well. If no one made you fight through learning mathematics, you might not be very good at mathematics. You didn't have that blessing. I was fortunate growing up. I grew up on the campus of Baldwin-Wallace College, which is now Baldwin-Wallace University.
Yes.
Grew up on campus. My father was on the faculty and was a coach, and so we grew up right on the campus, and the campus culture was such that there was tremendous pride in everything they did, in their academics, in their athletics, but most especially it just so happened at Baldwin-Wallace that one of our shining stars truly was our Conservatory of Music, our theater and dance. And so just because I was blessed with the opportunity to be at shows from the time I was 5 years old on, and to be exposed to extraordinary musicians and very talented people, and a culture in which that was really, calendars were built around when the various Bach festival was,
Sure.
or whatever, and so I was lucky to have been exposed to the arts. What's interesting to me now, though, is I've now spent 40 plus years in higher education and have felt a responsibility of keeping up with, okay, what is it we're going to need to provide in higher education for people to be able to navigate the future? And you go back all the way to Voltaire, and he said something along the lines of, there's a couple things that are important about having work, and one of them is doing something with your boredom. What would you do if you didn't work? You know, there's certain things you
Sure.
might do for a bit, but 168 hours in the week, if you never worked,
Right.
if you're never working on a common cause with good people, you know, what would you do? I think we're going to see a future of the work day and the work week aren't going to need to be quite as long because of automation. The evolution
Sure.
of the human work, I think, is going to be a little shorter in duration. I think the arts will be able to bridge the gap that people will appreciate, get into, look forward to, enjoy, that will maybe, as Voltaire said, work. One of the things it did was handle that boredom that could create. I think the arts are going to play a part in our future, maybe well after I'm gone, but I think they're going to provide an increased piece of the pie. I've always felt the arts are the spirit of something. You know, whether it's the music or the theater, I've always felt that athletics is one of the arts. The grace of a person going up over a high jump bar of 7.5 feet, or the figure skater, or
Sure.
whatever, the great catch in the corner of the end zone, whatever. But I think the arts in general, which have always been an important part of our culture,
Of course.
will become in the future even more in terms of the time spent for the general citizen. And isn't that cool that we can provide
Absolutely.
the training
Absolutely.
to make sure we can satisfy that need?
Absolutely. So I'm a first-year student, a freshman. I'm here. What are your last words of advice for me to join in this big thing that we call a university?
You know, I would perhaps say two things. One, ask questions. We used to say a silly thing to our guys all the time is, we used to say, smart guys ask questions, dumb guys don't never. Ask questions.
Absolutely.
I know you're curious. I know there's times where you don't understand the expectations someone's giving you, or that you don't know where to get something done, or where you find the help, or whatever. So I would tell someone, and it's hard sometimes to ask questions. You're sitting in a room, I don't care how old you are, if you're my age, and there's a guest speaker saying, okay, who can answer this question? And even at 100 years old, I'm sometimes a little shy
Sure.
to be step up. Boy, if you can have the courage to ask questions. And I think the second thing I would say, be engaged. Be engaged with what's here for your pleasure. Be engaged with the resources available for your assistance. Be engaged with learning about other people. And I've always heard, and I'm sure it's not accurate, but that the word university means unity in diversity.
Oh, lovely.
And that we all come from different places. When universities were created, you leave your little high school and you leave your little culture, and you leave what little you know, and you go into a place where you can learn more. And, you know, I would encourage our students to come and learn more about something other than what they've already learned about. And if they'll do that, I think they'll gain the confidence that they can go out into this big world, which is getting smaller, and feel confident that they can go out and compete, and that they know enough and they've experienced enough to fit in just fine.
Thank you so much for chatting with me today.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much for watching President Jim Tressel, Youngstown State University.